All right, well, we're here to talk about food, actually, and the realities of global warming, which cause flooding and drought, and we can work with flooding a little bit, which is what this is about. Not so much with drought. But anyway, I planted this little bit of corn here in 4 different plots right after a major rain, so that I was planting in muddy ground, and in fact, I pulled a little tractor in, which I used to anchor my little winch to pull the garden planter along. And it made a 6-inch deep trench, and I had to pull it out. So I planted the next day. In other words, it was wet. Usually that doesn't work. We'll discuss why and what can be done. So this line of corn here, this little one in front of the actual field corn, was planted in that wet soil, and it was planted with a slit drencher or a slit seeder. In other words, I opened a trench in the ground, and unfortunately I lost the planting video, but you can see that there is a trench there, and the trench was left open, which is very important when planting in wet conditions. And I had in this one a little wing on top of where the seed goes. This one was planted with a little wing about 1 inch on each side of the seed trench that opened up a place for the brace roots to go. These are brace roots down here. And where brace roots did not occur, I'll show that in a different line, the corn plant is about half, and the seed production is about half. This is actually pretty normal. So in other words, it does work to plant in wet soil if you can get a tractor through it. And this is the result. There's nothing wrong with this particular line. Like I said, it was put in with a slit trencher, and this is a little bit too deep right there apparently. But the depth of seed is important as well. Anyway, this particular line, and it is, as you can see on the shadows here, this is planted north to south, and the sun comes over east to west, and so the trench itself is exposed to sunlight for just a short amount of time. So there's a little bit of dirt on top of the seed on this one. That was, just because of the trencher that I used. It was not put there on purpose. This one is an open trench where I just went along and dropped seed into it. I don't know whether a lot of that seed was pulled out of there by birds or whatever, but if you the depth was roughly 2.5 to 3 inches deep, or the trench was. But I just dropped seed along in that trench. And some of the plants worked out well, some of the plants did not. And there was a very spotty resolution to how much and what did grow. But these are fairly normal plants, most of them, or half of them. And now we're going to go over here to a different line. And so this is where the tractor got stuck, if you can tell. Probably can't, but it was that muddy. So over here we were using a slit trencher, same as the other side, without the little wings on it to open it up so that the brace roots would go out. This shows you that it did not work well on this side, because the plants are all, half of what the ones on the other side are, and they have no brace roots, or they have very little brace roots. There's a little bit, a little bit here and there, but basically this did not work, and it is planted east to west so that the sunlight comes across and is in the trench, for most of the day, or if not all the day really. So so I don't know how much the direction of how you plant paid into that, but it is, you know, clearly obvious this did not work out well, and that's because it was planted in wet soil, same seed, same time, same day. So this is what you get in that particular situation. And it did not, like I said, it did not turn out so well. But that was to be expected. Over here it's still the same, but it's a little bit better. Might have been a little bit taller, or, you know, we're close to the other field corn here, and might have been nitrogen coming across, and things like that. I'm not sure. Over here is a line that was put in with a disc trencher, a different version, and it had a little wing on the bottom of it that went an inch below the seed line for the brace roots to come out of, or come out into. And while we got a little bit of plants here that are a little bit better, there is not much in line of brace roots here, and it did not produce a viable crop. Although we do have some brace roots here, and some of the corn is still okay. Some of it is not. And some of it, a lot of it, did not grow up, and this is where I waited till it was dry, and I flooded this with a garden hose, planted it wet, and then I put what would have been the equivalent of an inch of rain with a garden hose on top of the seed immediately after planting. So that's kind of what you get under those circumstances. Some of it grows, some of it doesn't, and that's the end result of that. So what we have here is then a look at what it means to have global warming create droughts and floods, and you best be preparing for that, or people are going to be starving for 1,000 different reasons. And of course one of them is that a 1% rise in population today, just 1%, 1 per 100 people, is still 80 million more mouths to feed per year added to the population. And that's after deaths, 80 million more per year. And they're going to be, you know, that's immigration. They got to go somewhere where you can't have them. It's kind of like neutering pets. Either you make the decision or you don't, and you suffer the consequences. So, and then of course we have all the trawlers that are out on the ocean, and they get every single one, so that the life in the ocean dies, because that little nation of fish, if you like, is now extinct. There is no more there to reproduce. And so the ocean itself dies, and the predator fish that feed on them die, and everything dies because of all the pollution in the water, and your world, your life, your future is purely in chaos, because it's not going to survive any of this at all. And that's just the reality of the thing. These are the choices you made. That's it. These are the choices you made. You did not accept the reality of what life needs, and so life collapses. Good luck with that. Global warming is about the heat you produce and release. It is not about greenhouse gases, which are a contributor, but it's not about that. Global warming is about what you do to release fossil fuel heat and more. And one of the biggest contributors, of course, is air conditioning, which you don't have to have, even though you want it. And of course, as global warming is about all the driving you do and everything else. It's a choice. But think about this. It only takes 1 hour at very hot temperatures to kill all life in the area. Stick your head in the oven at 140 degrees and see how long you want to last. In 1 hour, an entire, nation can be dissolved of all its life. plants and everything, because that's what you do. Decisions that you made. What you should learn, what you need to know about a lot of things is that what you don't know can kill you. For instance, this is a highly genetically altered crop, and while it has produced gains in a number of areas that have been beneficial, the reality of it is that they use only just one mother crop, so to speak. You know, like mom and dad, there are two joined genetic materials here, and the mother plant, so to speak, is inbred and inbred and inbred and inbred and inbred because they want the very same thing, so that they know exactly what they're going to get by changing the other side, the other parent of the crop. And of course, that mother plant is, when last I learned 10, 20 years ago, it was producing 30 bushel to the acre as opposed to 200 bushel to the acre for this. In other words, you can't just keep doing that. But more importantly, genetics resolve the issue of making changes by removing defenses. In other words, to get the changes that you get with this kind of increase in bushels means that they took out the defenses of the plant. And if they took out the defenses of the plant, that opens the entire species to an attack by disease, or a pandemic disease that can actually destroy the whole crop. And because this is a grass crop, that means that they're actually opening the door to the genetic pandemic among all grass cereal grains and things like that, which is 90% of what we eat, basically, because even the cattle that you eat and what have you comes from the grain that we are able to feed them, and most of that is the grass. So, and then of course there's all the nitrogen that these plants are producing, or not producing, but are being used to cultivate a bigger crop, and that is runoff, which ends in the sea, which destroys the entire coastal region, which destroys all the creatures that live in the Gulf region, in the area where a river spews out what's in it, and of course that kills some of the things in that river as well. And then around here, there's all kinds of things that they're doing that cause trouble. In other words, the people around here, to reduce flooding downstream, they replaced the bridges. And when they replaced the bridges, they took out the ponds and ensured that the ponds could not get back. And that, of course, is where life lives, and the actual fish in the rivers reproduce itself. They swim downstream during a big flood, and they lay eggs at the back end of those rivers so that the big fish can't come and get them while they grow up a little bit. And then when the next rain comes, then those little bitty fish swim downstream and join the river when they're a little older and not so vulnerable. And of course that ends, and then everything that depends on those ponds, which are all aquatic life, the frogs, the turtles, the everything, all of that is gone, because they don't care about that kind of life. Everything is about poisoning the ground so that you get a big crop. And of course, if you let the weeds go, the weeds are going to take over the crop, and you don't get anything at all. So you have to do something. And of course, chemicals made rural America disappear. Rural America is what I mean by a lot of people doing the same thing rather than a tiny few people doing what they do instead, by taking over everything. Weeds are in fact the greater blessing to farmers than they think, because it kept the rich man out back before chemicals. And so with chemicals, the rich man has been making gains and taking away everything, and causing entire towns and rural communities everywhere to be lost. And of course, you might not think that's a bad thing, but in real terms, that's happening over and over and over with everything. In this particular America particularly, they as always, the rich man tries to take it all, everything. And he's able, because you don't know what you're doing. We have to limit what they can do. We have to limit what they can take. It's called limited capitalism, and limited capitalism is the vote that we give to ourselves to control how much anyone gets in a nation. In other words, there's a limit to how much income you can have. There's a limit to how much property you can take. There's a limit to what you can do, because we, the rest of the people of the world, have needs too. It's not just you, even though that's all you think of. So, either we change ourselves and stop destroying our world, or we lose our world, because it really is at the gap between life and death. Of all the things you don't know that will kill you, genetics is certainly one of the biggest. They are injecting chaos into everything, all of nature. They actually have factory lines now to do it automatically, and the purpose is to find out how they can destroy something, or by destroying something they figure out, like a bridge, how they're going to fix it. But life is not a paint-by-numbers affair. And all they're doing is destroying life on Earth. And when asked, what will you do if life collapses? The three of them that I talked to said, not to worry, in 1 billion years or so, evolution will make something else. You want to wait 1 billion years? You want them to take your life away? COVID is a disease they produced. And it is a disease that the universities decided how much money it would cost you for their cure. And of course, their cure and their cure and their cure and their cure, as trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars flow out away from your pocket into theirs, so they can do whatever they want. And then, of course, there's the people who claim fusion, which is that that the sun creates helium with every BTU that it makes. But helium is one of the rarest elements in the universe. And if the sun was making helium with every BTU that it creates, this universe would be full of helium. It does not exist. Their fantasy is strictly imagination, and they get trillions of dollars too. The problem, of course, is they are even a bigger threat, because once they ignite atoms on fire, we cannot extinguish that. Just like an atomic bomb is said to be 4 million times more than the equivalent amount of what it would not be as an atomic bomb. 4 million times more makes a candle flame 65 or 62 miles tall, instantly. You can't compete with that. They say that the fire on the sun is 1 million miles long in flames, and they've measured solar flares to be 12 million miles long. So it may be true. The moon is 250,000 miles away from us, more or less. So think about that for a minute. 1 million mile long flames ignites the moon, and of course that means it's going to crash into the earth, but then the radiation, we couldn't survive anyway once the atoms are on fire. The entire planet is fuel. This is what your universities do. And you say, well, they're going to make something for us that we want. Well, if you look at this world, and you look at all the things that are hiding, we find that we are surrounded by threats of extinction. Literal extinction. It's not a game. It's not a guess. There's evidence for that. Real world evidence, not imagination or theory or claims of an expert like they did with global warming. Your expert said, well, it might not be. Well, it was. It is. And the cost of being wrong is high. And you know it. Think about it. Of things that can kill you that you don't know, that you ought to know, is that the amount of air sucked into a semi-truck going down the road at 55 for an hour is the same volume of air that about 120 people need over a 24-hour period. Such in a small economy car uses about the amount of air needed in that hour of time on the highway for about 30 people. And of course a pickup truck is like 50 people. So, you know, oxygen is a limited thing, and it is the percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere that lets you be alive and healthy. Another element of life is that according to the Illinois Water Survey people who found a small aquifer and measured it, it takes 50 inches of rainfall to put 1 inch of water back in the aquifer. Think about it. You know, there's a number of things that really should be recognized. One of them is if Trump is your answer, nobody counterfeited more. During his time as presidency, the claim of assets rose by $400 trillion. That's $4 million per each of 100 million people. So if you didn't get yours, who did? And during his presidency, $6 trillion was spent for COVID vaccines, a reality that the universities created and then profited from. $6 trillion is $60,000 for each and every one of 100 million people, or $60,000 per shot per each of 100 million people. Think about it.